Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast. Check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. And while you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. All the articles, all the other podcasts. Buy some books. Sign up for some academies. All that stuff. There's so much to do. And, of course, one of the things to do is to hit that donate link. Become a contributor. You can help us keep doing what we're doing. By making a one-time gift, sign up for a reoccurring gift, and thank you so much to those of you who do that. Chad, we are in Isaiah chapter 6. Going to take a turn. This is last episode we got through chapter 5. A lot of woes to the wicked, man. If you're the wicked, well, Isaiah's got a woe for you, and it wasn't good news. I mean, the woes are not typically what you want to hear, and he dishes all those out. And then this is really like a turn in the book of Isaiah. It's almost like if you were watching a movie and the movie starts like in the middle of like something that you don't have any context for, and you're like, well, okay, what's going on? I need to pay attention here, but I feel like I don't know how this started. Chapter 6 is the part in that movie where it goes back and it shows you, and here's how I got to this place that I was dishing out woes. So, yeah. Why are you the guy doing this, Isaiah? How did you get in this position? Well, Isaiah is going to tell you in chapter 6. Here's how this came to be.
Yeah, this is like, I see this all the time. My wife and I'll be watching some episode. I'll be like, is this the beginning? It's like starts. And then it'll say, 7 days earlier.
Yeah.
And then it'll flash back. So, yeah, here's your flashback to however long ago from when Isaiah was giving out the woes to when this all began, actually. So we're going to jump into the call narrative. Isaiah 6 is probably one of the more well-known chapters. I don't know, probably Isaiah 6 and 53 are probably the two chapters that people know. Maybe chapter 7. But it's certainly one of the top 5 most well-known chapters in Isaiah. And not only because of Isaiah the book, but also because some of the things that God says to Isaiah after he's called are going to pop up all over the place in the New Testament, especially in the Gospels. In fact, I think all 4 Gospels will quote the words from verses 9 and 10 about keep on hearing but do not understand, keep on seeing but do not perceive, that kind of language, especially in connection with the parables. So I think it pops up in the book of Acts as well. But anyway, these verses are quoted multiple times in the Gospels. So we'll spend some time talking about what those imply when we get to it. And also, I mean, this call scene is referred to by John the Evangelist too, as we'll see momentarily, surprisingly, in reference to the Son of God. Whose glory Isaiah saw. So there's a lot of crossover here between Old and New Testament and Isaiah chapter 6. And even if that even if that didn't happen, say the New Testament never quoted Isaiah 6, it would still be a highly significant chapter in Isaiah just because it's his call narrative. And the themes that he's going to introduce here are going to surface time and again through the rest of the book.
Yeah, this is sort of like the part where maybe you're hearing all this stuff and you're like, man, you're really sounds like you're speaking for God here, guy. And I'm interested. What exactly qualifies you to say this to us? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to tell you, like, well, here's my credentials. This is why.
Yeah, it'd be pretty hard to somehow, achieve something greater than these credentials. It's like, how do we know you speak for God? Well, let me tell you what I saw one day. Let me tell you what happened. I mean, it's somewhat, not exactly, but somewhat parallel to when Christ appears to Saul on his way to Damascus. And Saul repeats this multiple times as a way of demonstrating, hey, this is what happened, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
There's a lot of, you see that happen a number of times with people. You have Paul, and he'll reference it. this with Isaiah, and there's lots of other stories. Even think about the Transfiguration and how many times, Peter, James, or John will bring it up. But this was a pretty big moment, where, it wasn't necessarily this commissioning thing, but it was this sort of, it was a unique revelation, right? There wasn't a lot of people there. There was 3 of them that saw it, and this is pretty formative, right? So they'll be listen, I know this was the Messiah, he rose from the dead, and that's a pretty big deal, and that's how you can know. But we kind of knew before that because we saw him hanging out with Moses and Elisha on top of a mountain.
Yeah, I think if I saw that, or if I saw what happened in Isaiah 6, people would get tired of me telling the story because I would never stop telling the story. I mean, that you can't get more significant than this. So we began the book with Isaiah telling us that he was working, he was prophesying during the reigns of certain kings. And one of those, of course, is Uzziah. In fact, if I can get back over here to chapter 1, this is the way he begins. He says in verse 1, the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah. And then he mentions also Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So we're going to hear about the first of these guys at the beginning of chapter 6, and then we're going to hear about another one of these in the beginning of chapter 7, Ahaz. So he's going to start off chapter 6 referring to a king. He's going to start up chapter 7 referring to a king as well. And I think it's appropriate the way it begins. It says, in the year that King Uzziah died. And that's appropriate because what have we just heard about? Well, you mentioned the woes, this list of woes. There's a lot of talk about death and darkness and destruction in not just chapter 5, but really those first 5 chapters of the introduction to the entire book. So thematically, the death of Uzziah fits with everything that we've been hearing about. And when it begins that way, it makes you think, more death, It's going to be more desolation, more hopelessness. And there is going to be certainly some of that. In fact, there's going to be more than some of that surfaces in this chapter. But we also begin to see here the rising of hope in Isaiah, as well as this image of a remnant that's going to be saved and then spared and then ready for sprouting again, that we're going to get to at the end of chapter 6. So we'll have some darkness, but we're going to have some light as well. So I'll just start out here with the first maybe 4 verses, kind of get the scene, and then we'll see what Isaiah's response is to it. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the Seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. Yeah, that's not a scene that you forget. You're definitely going to remember that. So let's start out here where it begins in this year that King Uzziah died. This would have been around 740 BC. We know that King Uzziah he had long reign. He reigned 52 years. So he took the reign at the exact year that, at least in the U.S., teenagers can begin getting their driver's license. So
yes.
So 16 years old, he becomes king, and then he reigns for 52 years. So he's, depending on when his birthday was, he's around 68 years old when he dies. So we're middle of the 700s, around 740. Uzziah, who's also called Azariah. So if you want to look at the historical background of this, go back to 2 Kings chapter 15. That's going to kind of root you in the historical context. So we're mid-8th century. It's been 52 over half a century that this guy has been reigning, and his reign was, okay. He's the king that we know got full of himself. At one point, we're told that he became strong, and when he became strong, his heart became proud. And that pride exhibited itself when he usurped the authority of the priest, and he went into the holy place, and there he began to burn incense, which of course was the prerogative, really the gift that God had given to the priest. And so he begins to do this. The priests try and stop him, drag him out, and as this is happening, he's inflicted with a skin disease, leprosy, or whatever it was. And he had that, we're told, to his dying day. So he had to live in a separate house, and that's, keep in mind that people would have known that. So that's kind of the background as well. So even his demise and the disease he had and all of that is a fitting thematic element to keep in mind as we're kind of transitioning from chapter 5 to chapter 6. So in that year, he says, I saw the Lord. Now, if you're looking in your English Bibles, this is not the all caps signal for the divine name. This is Adonai, which is it's a distinctive form that is applied about, I think, 450 times or something like that in the Old Testament to Yahweh. So it doesn't say I saw Yahweh, it says I saw Adonai. There's no, we're referring to, of course, the same God, but it's a different terminology. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So I saw the Lord. And what's he doing? Well, he's enthroned. He's sitting upon a throne. He is high and lifted up. And what's he dressed in? We're told that he has a robe on, that the hem or the train of his robe filled the temple. Now, let me start there. There's kind of a cool detail here. If you go back in the Hebrew for this hem or train of his robe, that word occurs multiple times in Exodus to describe the vestments, not of a king, but of the high priest. So I've always seen this scene as kind of a combination of the regal and the priestly. So the Lord is sitting there as king. Obviously he's on a throne, right? But because you have the language of a priestly vestment applied to him, he's also he's where? Well, he's in the temple. So that's the place of the priest. So it's sort of a priestly, kingly image. He's dressed like a priest, and he's seated upon a regal throne. So he's kind of combining both of these in his one person. And the fact that Adonai is used here is I think a perfect segue to how this pops up in the Gospels, because of course when you turn to what's the verse there? Is that it's John 12, right? Yeah. So John 12 actually quotes Isaiah 6, and then about blinding the eyes and hardening the heart, and then immediately after that, John writes. This is John 12, I believe, verse 41. Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and spoke of him. So when John is talking about Isaiah 6 and referring to the glory and Isaiah's speech concerning the one upon the throne, he identifies him as none other than the Son of God. So here we have a clear Christophany.
Yeah, so one of the things that's cool about this one is that it is always weird. I guess you don't want to. You put the Lord there. It's weird to me when they do that because there's not you're inserting a the, and then you have Lord there, and when it makes more sense. When you have the divine name for God, and it's the definite article, all caps Lord, that works. You wouldn't say I saw the Adonai. You wouldn't say that, So that's a little weird. But whatever. You don't want to put Adonai there. That's fine. One of the things that I think is cool about this is that you do have him on the throne in the temple, and his robe is filled up, filled up. And you're what? What's the significance of that? Why does it matter if his robe fills the temple? That seems is that just cool imagery, or does it mean anything? And you might have thoughts on this, Chad, but to me, I always thought there's only one person in this temple wearing his robe fills up the whole thing. There are no other vestments. There's not other priests or anything. It's just him, right? And so his robe is enough. In fact, you couldn't have more robes in here. His train is filling up this whole temple. Don't even think about trying to bring in some different priest or another priest. You don't need him.
It's a one-garment closet.
Yes. I'm the only one that's wearing these vestments in here. You couldn't bring more vestments in here if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. Yeah, and then that fits perfectly with the fact that, so when you do see, for instance, the high priest or even other priest, whoever, and you think about them ministering inside the temple, maybe they're dealing with the showbread, or maybe they're trimming the lamps on the candelabra, or maybe they're standing in front of the altar of incense. Well, you're not seeing multiple priests. You're seeing a manifestation of those who hold the office, which represents the one priest.
Yeah,
that's one way to think about this.
Yeah, this is a way of saying like his priestliness has filled up the entirety of the temple.
Yeah,
so there is no other representation needed, or representatives needed, or lesser priests needed. That's all unnecessary. His priestliness is more than enough.
Yeah. And this is so beautiful when you think about what John says, that Isaiah said this because he saw his glory. And that means that already in this vision we have of the Son of God in the Old Testament, he's in the temple. He is filling the entire temple. He is divine, obviously. He's Adonai. But he also then is a king and a priest, already pictured here in this way. Mm-hmm. And the priestly nature of Jesus, of course, comes up multiple times in Hebrews. That's where it's the main. That's where that's the New Testament book where you see it the most. But in the opening chapters of Revelation, you do too. He's there when the Son of God appears. He's dressed in priestly garb, and he's got the lampstands around him. So Christ dressed as a priest is not only here in Isaiah 6, but you'll also see that in Revelation chapter 1.
Yeah, it does seem too like when you have like this kind of imagery, and then you have this seraphim, and you're like, what's the deal with this? Like you have like 6 wings, and it seems like the seraphim's like, man, it's a good thing I got 6 wings, because I'm gonna need to fly, of course, but I'm also gonna need to be covering my eyes, and I'm definitely, because I dare not look at this, cover my feet because I dare not tread on this. So I'm just kind of circling about, not covering my face, covering my feet, and then crying out, "Holy, holy is the Lord of hosts!" Right? I mean, is that what you take away from this? That it's like that you're like, this is not, because you have to understand like that. You're like, what? Like, okay, maybe you can wrap your head around, and you've seen this a lot where like you're not going to stare at the glory of God, and we're going to see Isaiah is going to be a little undone here. You're going to get the distinct impression that Isaiah thinks he's seeing something that he's not supposed to see.
Yeah,
right.
Yes.
Like that he is unworthy to behold this. So, and that's another place in Scripture we see that like that people would say, and God will say like, hey, you can't just like stare directly into my glory. Like, what are you, nuts? So even the seraphim seemed like he's like, yeah, I'm not going to like gaze into it. I'm not doing that. But then the feet thing is that this is the most unclean thing about a person or a creature is their feet. Certainly, we don't necessarily think that now in the same way, but we're also not wearing sandals and treading through dirt and stuff all over the place. And so it's not just that I'm not going to look at it or I'm not going to tread on it, but I'm also going to like cover my eyes lest I look at it, and cover my feet, because even though I'm not going to go down there and walk around on that, I don't even the Lord to see this the most unclean thing about me. Yeah, I think this has come up before in our discussions of the priesthood, but when the priest served in the tabernacle or the temple, in the long list of vestments, everything from the caps they were to wear all the way down to their robes, there is no mention of the shoes. And that's because they served barefoot. And they did that because shoes were considered to be unclean. You see that, of course, in Exodus chapter 3, where God tells Moses to take off his shoes, or in those opening chapters of Joshua, where the commander of the Lord's army, which I consider to be the Son of God too, tells Joshua to take off your shoes. So yeah, and by comparison, if even the seraphim, who serve right there in the Lord's presence and who call out, holy, 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 if they must cover their eyes and cover their feet, well then, what must sinners do? Yeah. Give us like 50 wings so we can cover the entirety of who we are, because we're certainly not worthy or clean enough to stand in his presence. Well, this is why like there's such an offense, right? I mean, like Peter is appalled when Jesus would get down on his hands and knees and start washing his feet. I mean, of all the things that Jesus does, and you're like, this was like the line, right? It's like, no. Like, we're not. You can't do that. Like like this. This is. Why does Peter object to that? Because this is his master, and like this is not just like a little bit, but radically beneath him, right? Like I can't allow that. Of course, Jesus is like, oh, my humiliation is going to go much, much further than this.
Yeah, if you think this is bad, you've seen nothing yet.
This is going to get way worse. But that's what Peter is objecting to, right? Is that like, you can't touch my feet. Like, I'm over here giving up everything, believing that you're the anointed one. I sure as heck can't have you touching my feet. Like that would be an assault on everything that I think you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll move on in just a second. Before we do, I want to say just one thing about the seraphim. If you check in the scholarly resources or commentaries on this, a lot of times you'll hear that the seraphim are serpentine figures. In fact, I looked at several resources this morning, and they say that. And the reason they do is because when this word occurs in many other contexts, it's often linked to serpents, to serpentine kind of figures. Now, the word itself behind seraphim is seraph, and the verbal form of that means to burn. So it's often understood, according to its etymology, as like burning ones or fiery ones. So there's one of the articles I was reading this morning said that, possibly these are serpentine figures with human-like characteristics as well. And I mean, possibly. One thing that I do, find somewhat humorous is that in the midst of all these arguments about, these being serpentine figures, no one refers to the fact that we are told explicitly they have feet, which serpents do not have. So, we're not told what they look like. Maybe they were serpentine in appearance. That's not the way that I typically think of them. I think of them as having more human characteristics. But
yeah, let me make an all the way back argument. Not that I think this is that important, but more just interesting. Because to your feet point of this, where it's like, oh, these like kind of like snaky kind of creatures here, but you're like, well, they got feet. But if you think about the fall of the devil, and if you're and this is a created being, and he's a serpentine figure to be sure in the garden, and you're like, okay, so you're like a fallen angelic creature. You're referenced as like a dragon or a serpent, but dragons are also old school dragons are very serpentine as well.
Yes.
But the curse is that he's not going to have no feet anymore.
Yeah, he's gonna crawl on his belly.
He's gonna crawl on his belly. And so if you were wondering, like, well, what's that about? Like, snakes don't have feet, and you're like, well,
maybe the seraphim do.
Seraphim do, and I don't. And if he's some sort of demonic seraphim kind of figure, this would maybe make sense. Like, is it important? No. Is it interesting?
No.
I don't know. Maybe a little.
It
bit.
is kind of It's a cool connection. So, if these are serpent figures with feet, then they would be the antithesis of the fallen serpent who must crawl about with dust as his food.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, could be. Yeah, you guys can you'll find someone that thinks that's the most important thing and go have a good discussion with them about it.
Yeah. So seraphim, and they're chanting, of course, the what's often called the Trisagion, which just means the thrice holy. Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh Sabaoth. And in this case, it's not Adonai, it is Yahweh, is Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory.
Don't you love that, by the way? You have all of this language, like, so far about, like, the earth being basically full of evil and wickedness and unrighteousness, and God is, like, about to have to bring down judgment. And this guy's flying around saying the whole earth is full of his glory, and then you have to, like, hold these two things in tension, where, like, we're like the earth is full of unrighteousness and wickedness and injustice, and yet full of the glory of God. And of course, this is because God only creates good things, right? And that even in the midst of sin and the world falling into disorder, from a angelic perspective, they still see a thing that was spoken into existence by God, and they're like you could sort of see through all of that and still see like the glory of God like pervasive through, not just like, hey, there's the in the earth there are glimpses of God's glory. No, that's not what he says at all. Like he says the whole earth is full of it. Like I can't look anywhere in the earth and not see it. And I think that this is a good, because I think this is true, and I think that the Christian can have this same perspective. Because look, man, you can easily say the earth is full of wickedness and sin, and you don't have to look hard to see it. The whole earth is full of it. You can look anywhere and see it. And if that's what you're looking for, that's what you'll find. However, like I would argue that the earth is still full of the glory of God as well. And if you're looking for that, you'll see it.
Yeah, you could. There's a heavenly and an earthly perspective, right? I mean, you can certainly find bad everywhere you look in the world, but you can also find good everywhere you look in the world when you consider that a good God made this good creation, and it remains that essentially, even though it's corrupted, of course, at the same time. I love how this particular part of the Holy, Holy, Holy has made its way into Christian worship. I mean, you could find it all kinds of Christian churches. It's in Roman Catholic, it's in Eastern Orthodox, it's in Anglican, it's in various Protestant churches. In our own tradition, a part of this hymn is sung right in the service leading up to the Lord's Supper. So, Holy, Holy, Holy is Sanctus is what it's often referred to from its Latin title. Holy, 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 Lord God of Sabaoth, heaven and earth are full of your glory. And then it goes on, Hosanna in the highest. So it's a beauty in the singing of this song or canticle in the worship service. It's a combination of the Psalm 18 or Psalm 118 rather, which was sung on Palm Sunday as Christ rode into Jerusalem, and also then Isaiah 6 with the Holy, Holy, Holy. And the idea is, as we're getting ready for the Lord's Supper, we've entered into the heavenly sphere. Heaven is present on earth. Christ is present with all the heavenly host. And just like the Seraphim sang these words, so now the saints here on earth sing these words, because we join with the angelic choir in singing before the presence of the Holy, Holy, Holy Lord of hosts, who is among us and is about to give us his gifts.
Well, and you know what I love about, I really like that. And one of the reasons I like it is that, you have this acknowledgement, so you're joining in, you're saying, Holy, 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 you're saying the earth is full of his glory, and there's like the body and blood of Christ is typically sitting up there, and you're saying that, you're about to, it's almost like your eyes have beheld the glory of God at this point, which is like in these simple and seemingly insignificant things.
Yeah.
And as you say that, where you say that, okay, so God is this thrice holy God, and then you couple it with this Hosanna in the highest, which is your acknowledgement of what you're asking him to do and what he's there to do, which is to save you, because this is what Hosanna means. Right? So
yes.
Like Hosanna, I think sometimes we think of Hosanna as the same thing as Hallelujah or something. It's just like some kind of Bible way of saying, it's a Bible praise word. You don't who knows what it means. It's just God likes it though. He likes it when you say it, and it means something about like it's some ecstatic utterance in a language that we no longer speak. But man, God likes it. But that's not it at all. Hosanna just means save us or save now or however you want to translate. But it's crying out for salvation. And so like when you're right before the Lord's Supper, if you're acknowledging that there's a holy God here, and what I need him to do is save me. And the good news is what he's here to do is save you.
He save you. Yeah. The Hebrew root behind save is the same one that we get in Jesus' own name. Yeah, he's the one who will save us from our sins. So it's like you're saying, save us, Jesus us, right? Give us yourself, save us. And the fact that it's conjoined then with the holiness of God means the holiness of God has not come here to wipe us out, but rather it's come to save us.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, such a lot of beautiful theology, Christology that's packed into these verses, and
Well, I guess it must be since we spent 30 minutes on 3 verses. So
yeah, we're making some rapid headway here. Well, the physical effects, as far as just the edifice itself, is you get the whole thing. I mean, it's shaking. The foundations of the thresholds are shaking at the voice of him who called. The house is filled with smoke, which is probably, I'm guessing, an image of the incense that's filling up the temple, which of course would have had its own, its odor. So you got the sights, you got the feels, you got the smells, you got all this stuff going on. And poor Isaiah, this is verse 5. So I'll just read the one verse versus verse 5. This is his reaction to all of this. I said, "Woe is me, for I am lost." I'll come back to that word. It can be translated a couple different ways, but ESV has, "I am lost." I think King James was undone. Why? For I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. So, yeah. Woe is me. That's Isaiah's response. He doesn't say, "Hallelujah, man, I'm seeing the seraphim. I'm seeing the Son of God enthroned here. I'm smelling the incense. I'm sitting here shaking along with the thresholds." He's like, "No, man, I'm done for. This is it. Woe is me." So that word "lost" can be translated a couple different ways. So it's the issue here is homonyms. So you got words that sound the same, and that in Hebrew here you have two. They're two different words. They're spelled the same. Damah. In English, should be like DMH, and one does mean to be destroyed, but the other one means to be silent. And I'm kind of torn here as to which way I want to go, because on the one hand, I like the idea of I'm destroyed, I'm lost, I'm undone, but I also like the idea of silence or silenced. I can't speak because of what he immediately says afterward. I'm a man of unclean lips. He focuses upon his speech. So I don't know what the best way to translate that is. One of these where you got to make a decision, but that's the background. It can mean either one of those. It's either I'm lost, undone, destroyed, or I'm struck mute. Maybe is the way that you could kind of render.
You're speechless because you have no clean speech. I dare not say anything because anything that would pass through my lips is going to be unclean. What am I supposed to do here? Yeah. I do like that he is like, listen, long before I said woe is you, I said woe is me. Right? So like this woe is not just reserved for the masses, but he's like, I too was in a position of woe, and what and the question then, if you kind of pause right here, then is like, what can be done then? Isaiah's wishing he had some wings, but he didn't. So no covering his face, no covering his feet. He's just left there exposed, and this is where you get the Hosanna in right here, right? Like, what's going to happen to you? You're going to be in the presence of a holy God with unclean lips, and you can't cover yourself with wings. You're just there, sort of naked and exposed before God, and you find out what God's prerogative really is.
Yeah, this is you alluded to this earlier. This is the cry of many people who have, maybe not in these words, but when they've seen God, they're like, what am I going to do? Often it's afterward. Wait, they're like looking at themselves like, wait, I'm still alive, and I saw God. I can't believe that I survived that. Here, he doesn't know what's going to happen yet, but he's like, I'm done for, because I've seen the King, the Lord of hosts. I have actually laid my eyes on none other than Yahweh himself, the King of kings and the Lord of lords.
Yeah, and the answer, by the way, for what you're going to do is nothing. There's nothing for you to do. This is the pause. It's nice that they put like a little gap here in the verses, and this is the pause, where you're going to do nothing. Everything comes down to what is God going to do, because you have no power here. You're completely exposed. You have no any words you say will just increase your condemnation, right? So now the ball is officially in God's court at this point.
Yeah, which is the way this is, entirely meant to be. This is the whole setup, right? He doesn't say, "Oh, I know what I'll do," I'll whatever. No, just say your confession and then shut up and let God do his work. So the work is what's described in verses 6 and 7. Then one of the seraphim, and I wish we knew how many there were. Seraphim is just plural. Could be
Probably
2,
seven,
3,
probably
4.
7 of them flying around.
Yeah, okay. 7. Yeah, we'll go with I love that. So one of the seraphim flew to me, and what did he have? He had in his hand a burning coal, live coal, that he had taken with tongs from the altar. I love the fact that even angels can't handle live coals. He's like, "You got any tongs here I can use?"
This also makes me believe that this seraphim has hands. You can't use. I don't know if you've ever tried to use tongs, but those it seems like you need fingers and thumbs for those.
Right? Yeah. So he's got his wings. He flies, but first he goes and gets a tong, and then he goes to the altar, and he's got this burning coal. Now this is so perfect for so many reasons. I mean, we all know what the altar's for, of course. The altar is for sacrifice. That's what it's for. The altar is the place of atonement. The altar is a place where blood is shed. The altar is a place where sins are atoned for, and you have this blood that's right there from this altar of atonement. And the angel has it in the tongue. And what's he going to do? Well, he flies to Isaiah, and then we're told he touched my mouth. So he does the action. You have the physicality of it. He actually touches the mouth of Isaiah, the mouth that had just said, "I'm lost. I'm a man of unclean lips. I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips." And then the angel says this, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for." There you go.
Yeah.
God took care of it.
Well,
so perfect.
It's great, and we won't get into this until next episode, but the thing that's great is that God is going to ask a question, and Isaiah is going to answer this question. He's going to respond to it. But certainly before Isaiah can give the response to the question, he's going to need to have his guilt taken away and his sin atoned for. Right? And this is the thing that happens where you're confronted with God, and you could not possibly speak to God. You could have nothing to say to God until this remarkable thing happens where all of your sin is taken away, and now you can speak with God. It's like when the curtain is torn in the temple. Like all of a sudden your relationship with God, because of forgiveness and atonement, is completely changed. Yeah.
There's no more fear afterward. Like, can I open my lips now? Of course you can, because it's taken care of. Yeah, your guilt is taken away. Your sin is atoned for. And just to add one more thing, getting back to what we were just discussing, this is why, one of the reasons why "Holy, Holy, Holy" is the Lord of Hosts is sung in preparation for the Lord's Supper, because it's such a perfect lead-in to that. You're taking into you the body and blood of our Lord. And as a result, your guilt is taken away and your sin is atoned for, all because of the sacrifice that Christ has made for us.
Yeah.
Well, we did 6 verses. Is it 7 verses? 7 verses, right? A very biblical number of verses for one episode.
Yeah, that's it, man. This is one of those dense chapters. So I'm not surprised we didn't make it all the way through. I wouldn't have, if you'd have asked me to put money on it beforehand, I would have said no. I don't think we're going to make it. But and we got good stuff coming up. Like this is not, Isaiah has not been commissioned yet. He's just been placed in front of God and had his sins forgiven, which is pretty great. And we'll see what God's going to do with a forgiven sinner. We'll see what he has in store for him next episode.
Sounds good. See you then.
All right, I'll see you then, Chad.